Hello, everyone, and welcome to Financial Views with Local Brews, Episode 2. My guest today is Dave Colt, co-founder of one of the largest breweries in all of the Midwest, King Brewing, right out of our backyard here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We talk origins, how they've managed their growth over the last 10 years, and what's in store for them moving forward. I hope you enjoy it, and as always, cheers. The next round's on me. All right, well, I'm sitting down with Dave Colt, co-founder of King. Thank you for doing this, man. How are you?
I'm great, Geoff. Thanks for having me and thinking of King.
Absolutely. I moved to the Midwest back in 2013, and obviously I visited the one in Fishers that you had prior to opening up all the locations that you have around the city, so appreciate that. Now, obviously, you're very well known in Indianapolis. For those that may not know the origin story of King, if you wouldn't mind telling my listenership how you guys got started and go forward from there.
Thanks for asking. I'm going to tell you it started when I was 5 years old, not King itself, but my love of beer at that point. There were some adults in my life that, were drinking the stuff out of these cans and really enjoying it. And then something happened on the TV, a sporting event, and they all kind of like rushed to the TV to cheer or whatever. And I was like, what's in these cans? And I took a sip and I went, ooh, this is good. I like whatever this is really good. And then I handed it to my brother and took a sip. And to this day, he's not really a big beer fan. I don't think that it had anything to do with it, but it's a fun story to tell.
Gotcha.
So fast forward, after moving to Indianapolis, I went to Hanover College, and I was working at a brew pub called Circle V Brewing Company. Opened in 96 and closed in 99. But in those 3 years, I was a bartender, but I'd always loved beer. And so I was talking to one of the owners who was the brewer, and I said, hey, man, can I come help out one day? And he goes, yeah, be here at 7 a.m. And I was like, crap, I'm the closing bartender. So, it was a little bit of a rough morning, but got there. And then that magical moment of mashing in, just that delicious breakfast, sweet grain thing going on. And I went, damn, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that's where King started. But how it developed was my friendship with my co-founding partner, Clay Robinson. And so Clay and I met, oddly enough, at that Circle V Brewing Company. We were one of the only, breweries at the time that would sell you to-go beer in kegs. Broad Ripple Brew Pub never really did that, and there weren't very many breweries to begin with, so we were a bit unique on that front. So Clay had a rock and roll habit that he liked to pay by vending craft beer at fish shows. So at fish shows. So we still have his Westie out back here. It doesn't run, but it's here, and we keep swearing that we're gonna restore it, and we just never get around to do it.
Does he hit them every time they come over to Noblesville?
He's got a young kid, so not for a few years, but I'm sure that'll be, he'll be back in good form. So he likes to refer to that he's a reformed hippie, not being an entrepreneur, but if you think about it, he was an entrepreneur then, trying to sell beer for his rock and roll habit. So we, met then, but fast forward a few years, he was the head brewer at Rock Bottom downtown, and I was the assistant brewer at the Ram when it opened. And, he came over with his assistant to check on the new guys, see how they're doing, and have a beer and, some fellowship. And so when he walked in the room, we're both like, hey, do I know you? And then, kind of worked backwards and figured that part of it out. So we remained friends after that. On Fridays, we'd go to each other's place and have a pint and talk about beer and all that kind of good stuff. Clay then exited the brewing scene. I became the head brewer at the Ram downtown. And they were opening up a second location in Fishers that didn't have a brewery, so beer needed to be supplied up there, so I needed to hire somebody to come work. I was actually calling Clay to get someone else's phone number because he was kind of out of the craft beer game at the time, and he said, "No, man, I want to get back in." So we started in 2005 working together. And when you lock two guys in a room for 50 hours a week polishing copper and making beer, they're going to start talking about stuff, right? We got some hours to fill. So we really started very simply just like, hey, what's the best job you ever had? What's the worst job? And that kind of evolved into, if you had your own place, what would you do? And the more we talked, the more we saw eye to eye on everything on that front. And then toward the end of our career at the Ram, we would have people come in who were, interested in starting a brewery, but they didn't have the brewing knowledge. They had the cash. And so, we'd taken a couple of meetings here and there and decided, man, if we work for somebody else who doesn't understand brewing, then it's just like the job that we presently have. Gotcha. So we have the knowledge, let's go find the money. And that's when Sun King really started to, get going with the idea of what we wanted to do, not open up a pub, which was the common model at the time, and just really kind of get after, let's make beer.
Nice. Well, I think creativity is definitely a hallmark of the craft brew universe, and you guys are no exception. You have some of the craziest names for the beers out of any that I've seen. Obviously, my favorite is Osiris, but if you wouldn't mind sharing a couple stories about how you guys originate and come up with the names of your entire lineup.
Sunlight Cream Ale just makes some sense, right? That's our flagship. It's about 40% of the beer that we produce is that guy right there. And it actually started off as a seasonal beer. It wasn't meant to be part of the mainstay lineup. Yeah. When we, our original lineup, Osiris, WeMac, and Bitter Druid, we're like, all right, cool. Yeah. Guess what style of beer really wasn't very popular in 2009? Bitters, exactly.
They're coming around now.
They are, but it's kind of a tweener, right? Yeah. If you're a hophead, it's not hoppy enough, and if you're a malty, like the Malty Boys, then it's not that either. So it's a pretty nuanced beer, and we were like, oh yeah, this is very sophisticated. Particle Brew Pub, has had a lot of success with their ESB, and so we're like, all right, the market seems like it might want to start off with that. And that was the first beer that we killed out of that lineup. But when we got through brewing our first revolutions of those beers, we're like, well, we need a seasonal. Man, it's hot out, so let's make a cream ale. But let's invoke the spirit of like Little Kings or Jenny Cream from out east, but do it in a craft manner. And so we put it out there, sold really well. Still hot. People coming in, getting dollar fills or saying, hey, can you make some more? And we're like, all right. So we kept making it, and we're like, shit. We keep selling it faster and faster and faster every time we make it. And so, it's one of those lessons that young entrepreneurs need to understand, is that your customer base will tell you what they want, and you just need to listen. So we listened and said, hey man, this is a fun beer to make. It's an easy brew day as far as that's concerned. So let's keep going. So when we named it, we wanted to invoke that it's a lighter style of beer. And Sun King is in the name, so we're like, hey, Sunlight, right?
There you go.
We sent it off to the TTB and we spelled it differently, and they were like, no. It sounds like you're promising low calorie. So they didn't give us any guidelines back, so then we had to respell it a different way so that they would go, yep, good. Right? Just fun things that you learn along the way. WeMac was the second or third beer that we made. It's still part of our core lineup. Right. When we were looking at it, we didn't have any draft accounts around town, but we knew Stuart from formerly McNiven's, who's one of the owners there, and it was a good craft beer bar for sure. Always was. And their little logo, the little Scottish guy, they called WeMac, and so we're like, well, if we name it WeMac, there's probably a good chance that he's going to pick it up and put it on draft. And sure enough, that's what he did.
Fantastic. Little guerrilla marketing there.
A little bit, a little targeted marketing, but we like the name. It worked really well for this, it's a hybrid style.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cross between McCune's and Sammy Smith's. You've got that nice big malty, hops are very low, kind of caramel notes in there and just a little whisper of chocolate.
Nice.
So that's how we got to be named. And then Osiris, we were just kind of tooling around trying to figure out what would be a cool name for it. And then Clay was doing a little internet searching and found that in Egyptian mythology, Osiris is, always depicted with a green face. Hops are green. It's a hoppy beer, so that kind of works. And also, he was the god of vegetation in the underworld, but not like in hell or damnation.
Right.
Just like there's the heavens and then the underworld or the terrestrial world that we all occupy, right?
Gotcha.
So we're like, hey, this kind of lines up, and it's a cool name, and most importantly, no one had used it.
Fantastic. I mean, that's definitely my favorite of your lineup, man.
It's my daily beer.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we share a kinship there, man.
Cheers.
That's good. Now, you guys have grown quite a lot since 2009. Is there any of the forefathers, legacy breweries that you look to for guidance or inspiration? If so, who would that be?
I mean, first and foremost, Sierra Nevada. It was the first time I had a hoppy beer like that, an American-style hoppy beer, right? You have Bass, which is, pale ale, and some other stuff from other places. But the first time I tasted, Old Girl, the OG hoppy, right? Sierra Nevada Pale, I went, whoa, what is this? This is fantastic. This is before my craft brewing career started, right? And I went, dang, what the heck? And then, just kind of followed that, their story and what they had going on, and, it was like, wow, way to go, man. This is great. Didn't think at the time that I would have my own place as well. So they were sort of a North Star as far as that's concerned. But when we started getting going, we had friends in the brewing industry that maybe left pubs and started to work at bigger places like, Surly Brewing, our friends out at, I'm drawing a blank, Dale's Pale, Oscar Blues, yeah. Okay. Our friends at Oscar Blues and some other places that had been where we were. And so whenever we had questions about equipment or, moving to that next step, we'd ping our friends and, say, hey, what did you guys do when you encountered this problem? And they were, true to, pretty much universally through craft, sharing knowledge and saying, yeah, but don't do that, right? It's most important to know those things too.
Sure,
and
lean on your forefathers.
Exactly, and so we, and they were freshly, just beyond that phase, or maybe somebody had some equipment that they were getting ready to phase out because they needed bigger stuff. So, a bunch of those things for sure. Yeah.
That's great, man. It's, you guys, I like to think of you guys as kind of mad scientists because you're always tinkering with all these new blends and whatnot. Give me kind of a backstory on one that came up short and that was just a failure. It sounded good on paper and you tinkered with it, but it just never manifested and came out the way you liked.
Oh, this is going to sound really not what you want to hear.
Yeah.
But we've not, before opening up Sun King, I'd been brewing professionally for 10 years. So,
gotcha.
Maybe I worked out some kinks on that front.
Sure.
So Clay was 2 years behind me in professional brewing. So, combined we had 18 years when we opened the doors. Some things we may have made some beers where I was like, it missed the mark. Right. Is it still good? Does it nail the style? But is it the absolute expression of what we wanted? Maybe not. So,
Well, on the flip side of that, a success that I have to hear the story of how it came about was I tried your Jack's Chocolate Donut Stout.
Oh,
I don't know, that was maybe a few years ago, but how does that idea to mix Jack's Donuts into a stout, and how did that symmetry come together, or synergy rather come together?
Stouts, started to pop up in popularity, and we were taking a look at trends as we do, hazies and that sort of thing, and we're like, okay, how do we do this, but we do it, pardon me, CO2 bubbles there, we do it the Sun King way.
Yeah.
And so, taking a look at it, and we'd met the folks at Jack's Donuts. We'd done some beer pairings here where they came, people would come in, they pre-ordered flights. This is pre-COVID, obviously.
Sure.
So they'd order, a flight of beers, and then we had donuts paired with each flight. So, super fun. They were a blast to work with. And when we thought about this pastry stout, we immediately were like, well, who doesn't like donuts? So, we hit those good folks up and had them come in, and we sat down and tasted a bunch of different, again, perks of the job.
Sure.
Like, having some more donuts and saying to ourselves, I think the chocolate one works the best, but could we modify your, chocolate frosted chocolate donut? We're looking for these, attributes that'll blend well with the malt. So we, they were like, hell yeah, we'll do that. So we just, had a ball putting in about 500 donuts into our 5,000th batch of beer.
Wow.
Yeah. Man, the barrel-aged version, so good as well. And on nitro, that beer was stunning. It was just, you tried it.
Yeah.
Did it taste like the entire front-to-back experience of eating a donut, but
yes,
in beer form?
Right. Yeah, I got to be honest, it did. I was like, this is incredible. I've never had anything like this before.
Yeah.
Is that stuff that you guys are always looking to do here in the local community, is kind of pair up kind of what you're doing with a growing foodie scene or anything like that?
Yeah, from the very beginning, we wanted to, take a look at it. It was obviously the Great Recession when we opened up the doors, and we're like, can we highlight, not just ourselves, but highlight local producers who are doing fantastic things. And it was, I think, before the food scene here in Indy really started to get going, and just look at local producers and say, how can we connect with them? Can we use their product? If not, can we do a pairing? Can we do, other things that show folks like, hey, you don't have to look for national brands. There are people making fantastic things. Wonderful things are grown here. I would put Indiana tomatoes in the summer up against anybody's, right?
Nice.
So those kinds of things to take a look at. So we've done things, we've done stuff with Best Chocolate in Town. Their Wee-Mac truffle, when pre-COVID was one of their, best-selling chocolates in the mix. We, have done things with Just Pop In. In fact, for our Royal Order member, which is a subscription, you get 2 of every single release from our sour and barrel-aged side. We're going to be doing a Zoom pairing very soon with popcorn on that front. So we're going to be cutting loose a barrel-aged version of Whoopie Pie, which was the second pastry stout that we did.
Oh, nice.
And then we're also doing a double dip on that front. So then we're doing Practical Magic, which is a slow gin fizz-inspired sour beer.
Interesting. Now, obviously, Indiana has a tremendous beer scene, and it's grown tremendously over the years. If you had to pick a sister brewery of yours, other than your own blends, to kind of enjoy beer, who would it be? If you could think of a couple, who would it be outside your own?
The folks at Chili Water always make some good stuff. I love popping in there and checking those guys out. Golly, who else? There are so many. I'm just trying to think of, like, in concentric circles. Metazoa's doing a nice job. Rob Malad, who is one of the brewers for us, left to go to Ohio to start something up, and then came back here, and is a brewer there, so they do some really nice things, just to name two.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's one of the things I enjoyed about starting this podcast is there is so many different flavors of craft breweries all around the state. So it's nice to know here in the home base we got a tremendous amount of selection there. So that's great. Dovetailing to that, if you had, obviously from the Sierra Nevada days to when you guys started, now the craft scene has kind of exploded. If you had, in my seat on the day-to-day basis as a wealth consultant and financial advisor, part of my job is, counseling, guiding, and educating on different things that are happening in the marketplace. If you had a home brewer come to you today, what advice would you give them as they want to move forward in pursuing a dream on their own?
Well, Geoff, we've done a lot of mentoring over the years. I mean, we're paying it forward just like the people who helped us in conversations. So we've chatted with a lot of folks who want to start up breweries. And, I guess I would say that the market is intense out there. Don't try to rush to package right away. Build your brand brick by brick through your tap room or pub or whatever it is that you've got going on, and really think about what it is that you want to achieve. For us, we wanted to have Indianapolis and Sun King be synonymous, like you think about Surly in Minneapolis and other breweries like that.
Sure.
So that meant that we probably need to get to package. So do you want a really nice chill life? Maybe stick to some accounts, some draft, and because you can self-distro, which is a boon. Don't go rushing into going to a distributor. Because you're going to lose some margin on that. So you're taking 30 points off the top to go through distribution. We waited for a very long time before we pulled the trigger on that because we knew that we needed that capital to continue to grow. Mm-hmm. So, be patient, do your due diligence, get as much experience on all sides of brewing, front of house, back of house. And if you do want to go, blow it up and try and be, a Sun King size, you can. There's always room for great beer, but it's a little tough. It's tougher sledding right now. Grocery stores, the shelf is completely proliferated with brands that have been there before you, legacy brands that have been there before you. So it's going to take some serious work to try and crack into that.
Gotcha. And that, I'm a big fan of a growth mindset, thinking abundantly, and that kind of dovetails in. Obviously, you've grown substantially since 2009, and growth, I work with a lot of business owners and individuals that want to grow very quickly, but then they can't really manage the growth that they've manifested. How have you guys kept the kind of reins on the growth over these last many years to get, because now you have 3 big locations inside of Indianapolis. I was speaking with one of my friends down in Florida. He had a Sun King beer in Sarasota. So obviously you guys are getting the growth south, but how have you guys kind of managed that and keep it within the I would say hold the reins on it so not grow too quickly?
I mean, there is the desire, especially when we started to first pop up, and our biggest day in awards was 2011 at the Great American Beer Festival, where we won 8, which nobody else has ever done that. So
that's awesome.
That day, or not that day, but obviously the next week, we were getting calls from distributors across the country, and we were tempted to, build a big ass brewery that could just pump out beers for days. And we thought, is that what we're about? Is that who we want to be? So we want to grow consciously with purpose, not, overshoot anything. One of our mantras internally is under promise and over deliver. And that means to yourself too, right? Yeah. So, we could have spent $20 million and built this monolith brewery, and that would have been cool and had its own, fun challenges and stuff. But it just didn't feel it didn't feel right, and it didn't feel like what our purpose is here. So,
Gotcha.
We want to grow purposefully. We want to grow consciously. When we take on then when we were distributing, when we took on a new account, we didn't ever want to run them out of beer. So there were times, especially in summers, in our first 5 years, where we had to say, sorry, we can't, we can pick you back up in the fall when things slow down a bit. But when we have you as a customer, we want to make sure that we fulfill your needs, because an out on the shelf or tap handle with no beer pouring out of it does none of us any good. So, during the winters are when we, spend the capital, we can install new equipment and bring it online. And so that's why we would hold people off until that time.
Gotcha.
So now it's the same thing, but with distributors. Like, we don't ever want to run you out of beer. So can we, in good conscience, take you on with what we have going on and make sure that all of our needs are served?
Good. Well, obviously that growth has led to a certain place. I'm starting to see a trend that once breweries get to the certain size, then they want to kind of diversify. You're seeing some go on to the bourbon side with whiskey, and you've seen some go in the seltzer game. What was part of the decision to not just be a brewery, but move from a brewery to a beverage company? So what was kind of the mindset behind bringing out the seltzers?
I appreciate that question. I want to kind of back up just a smidge, because you've said growth a couple of times, and I want to address that. Growth doesn't mean like dynamic, growth in the sense that you've got this hockey stick kind of thing happening. Growth can be, measured in many ways. There, at one point, we had a person that worked in production who said, well, if we don't keep growing like exponentially over the years, then what do we have going on? Growth can mean, enriching our lives, talking about how we, work in the community and how we're a good steward and partner. Growth can mean so many different things, and not necessarily this dynamic, hey, we were, X number of barrels and now we're 10 times that, right? So when we started to, slow down a little bit as far as that, percentage of growth, still growth, but the percentage started to slow down a minute, we were able to say, do we have passion projects or other things that we want to take a look at doing and being a part of? And one of them was distilling. So before we even get to seltzers, we opened up a distillery in Carmel, right? So baked into the DNA before Sun King even had a name, I was talking to one of our financial partners, and Clay's dad, actually, Omar, who was our first president and CEO. Clay and I now share that role because he's since retired and moved on to, he's a serial entrepreneur, so he just keeps doing another business and another business, and he's in his mid-80s, so it's pretty awesome.
Keeps him young.
It does, absolutely. Yeah. So, I said, hey, if we do this beer thing really well, there's a chance we can make some pretty decent spirits. And he said, Dave, what the hell do we know about making spirits? And I said, well, two things, Omar. Thing number one is it all starts with fermentation. We're pretty good at that. And then secondarily, if toothless hillbillies in Appalachia can make some damn good shine with some very rustic equipment, I think we might have a shot in making some tasty things as well. So, that was always kind of on the side, a back burner thing, and we were just waiting for the right time, opportunity, and, human capital as well as actual money to make that a reality.
Gotcha.
So fast forwarding to seltzers was your question. So seltzers, it's fermentation. We're the fermentation people, right? So we, started to take on that project and look at the exponential growth of that segment, and said, okay, how do we do this our way? What flavors do we want to bring to bear? And that market just continues to grow triple digits, right? So Yeah.
Can't go broke taking a profit.
You can't go, exactly. Hey, we already have the equipment. We already,
Right.
So why not?
Gotcha. Well, it's interesting to see these different trends come along and manifest themselves and blow up. Are you guys seeing any kind of new trends that you're keeping your eye on that you may give a look to, or maybe it's jumping off something of interest to where, hey, that's worth exploring? Anything like that?
RTDs, ready to drinks, right? So with spirits, on the spirit side, we haven't even begun to go down that road yet. We have canning prowess and we have fermentation prowess. So that seems like a natural next evolution for us. So Sun King is a brewery first and foremost, but we're kind of a secret adult beverage company.
Yeah.
We don't mess around with wine, but really everything else is pretty fair game.
That's really something you saw the single shots coming with the wine, right? That's okay. Well, that's good to know. I love the design of the places that you've built, and now the Fishers Districts and the Carmel Arch District. Was that a design of your own? Did you utilize a research agency for that, as far as the triple tier and all the things you wanted to do? Or are you just like, hey, I want to make beer, you guys design a fun place for us to serve it?
No, we have our hand in all of it. The place that we're in presently, the mothership as we like to refer to it, was out of necessity. We came up with the name and we got the funding way faster than we did. Yes. Yeah, please.
One more.
Sorry, we were ordering another round of beers.
Pause break for more beer. Yeah, more beer.
So we, this place was perfectly set up for a startup brewery because of the way the layout is.
Sure.
So, that's really why this building exists. But it took us over 6 months to find a building. During the Great Recession, you would think that we would have but it was so strange. We'd look at places and, the lease was weird or just all kinds of different stuff. And we actually looked at the church across the street, which had Loomis Armored Car, services, and they weren't re-upping their lease. It's the 8,000 square foot cinder block building attached to this little church, and we're like, oh, that'd be a cute little tap room, right?
Yeah,
and then production could happen in that big cinder block building. All great. Thank God we didn't get it. They re-signed their lease once, the same landlord is here, dangled us in front of them, and he said, hey, I have a building across the street. Would you be interested in that? And we're like, all right, it's not as cool, but
I get the church idea. I've actually been in some wineries where they buy an old church, they reverse the pews, and it becomes their tasting room. So that's a pretty eclectic, setup that not a lot of people have. So I can get the interest there, man.
There are a couple of breweries that have done that as well. Church Brew Works in Pittsburgh, and there's in New Buffalo. There's Church Beer Brewing. I was just up there a couple of weeks ago. Tasty stuff, for sure. So it's just, one of those things, getting into the right space. So past that, our first, dipping our toe into trying another space was in a strip mall. Really exciting. That's the place you went to first, right?
Yeah.
Encountered Sun King the first time. But we wanted to have a proof of concept. Would people care beyond, the mothership if we had another? Thank you, Colleen.
Appreciate it.
Whoop.
Cheers.
Cheers.
You do the tap on the table too. My wife's was a bartender and general manager at times. In the tap, she always chastises me if I don't do the tap, man. You got to respect the.
I bartended after college when I was trying to figure out what the hell I wanted to do. So, so back to the spaces and design. We're like, all right, let's. It's a short lease. We can kind of build it out. Won't be terribly spendy, and let's just see if people will care. And they did, which was great. So that gave us the confidence to move forward with Carmel location was next, and we got with the developer, Old Town, and the reason why we got hooked up with them is a great story. Justin Moffitt, who's one of the principals there, his wife's favorite beer before she went keto was Osiris, and she said, she said, hey, before you go asking anybody else about putting in any kind of, beer or whatever, you need to go talk to Sun King. So he cold called us, and we had some meetings, and we were like, well, I don't know yet. Let's see this sort of develop a little bit more. And as the picture started to become clearer, we're like, hell yeah, let's do this thing. It was only going to be, it started off being 14,000 square feet. We were going to take the bottom floor at 7,000, and their offices were going to be on the top floor. How cool is that? Yeah. And then he kept looking at it, and he's like, yeah, this real estate is too hot for us to, put our office in here. We'll move it someplace where the rent isn't going to be quite as big. Do you guys want all of it? And we're like, well, yeah, if we put in a distillery, it's going to take up, X square feet of that. So it just kind of continued to morph during the conversation. Thinking about what folks want, we wanted to make sure that we were bringing cool concepts, from California and Colorado and stuff this way, with the food pod situation. So It's like bringing food trucks indoors year round. And so, we saw that being a successful model, but not having a production element in the mix. And we're like, woo, this sounds really cool. And we have our beer already, so here we go. We, engaged Delve Architecture to come up with the building design. So on the exterior, the Monon Trail used to be a railroad line. So the next time you see that building, look at it and think about an old train station. So you've got this brick building that sort of funnels in. The the distillery sort of stands alone with a corrugated metal sides.
Man, as you're explaining it now, I'm seeing it in my head from being there so many times.
Yeah, so even though it's part of the same building, the exterior package differentiates itself from the rest of the building, and that corrugated metal now looks like a train car, right? Mm-hmm. So we made a giant train car.
That's awesome.
And then when we came inside the design, we pulled that element of train car and made corrugated metal fronts to look like shipping containers for all of the food pods. So, we wanted to be very purposeful with our design, and this is all, collaboration with Delve on that front, and taking a look at what do we have historically, is there something to pull from. We don't have to be too obvious about it, but can be cool at the same time.
No, because I love the communal part of it with the courtyards and everything, and the live music that Carmel does, or even in Fishers where they built that whole new district where you guys are kind of in the central of the back there. Yeah. I think it's meant to have people visiting it, and that's hopefully one thing we can get back to.
Yeah, please.
Do you guys participate in a lot of the local festivals and things like that go on throughout the state?
We, have obviously pre-COVID.
Sure.
So we have a community development team that pre-COVID we participated in over 700 different. I know. People are like,
that's
what?
A big number.
Wait, what?
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
So we participated in 700 different festivals, organizations, fundraising. We, very much want to give back to our community and make this a better place and a better city for everybody. So that's one of those things, donated product for, your kids, silent auction fundraiser, all the way through and including, being a part of Carmel Fest,
sure,
and other, bigger ticket items, being a part of New Fields and, pretty much you name it.
Yeah, because I sit on the board of a local charity called the Indiana Diaper Bank, and you guys have been gracious and given beer tours for some of the virtual events that we've had.
We've done some diaper drives too, right?
It's fantastic. We really appreciate your support in that regard.
It's our pleasure.
That's one thing I think that's strong within where we're at here in Indianapolis, a very servant attitude amongst the community here, and I think everybody's waiting for that day where we're going to jump off, and I think we've had a good test with March Madness and now leading up to the 500. I think hopefully we'll start to see everything outdoors that we're coming back. The weather's been kind of wonky this week, but
I mean, the old saying, right?
Yeah.
Where are you from originally?
So I'm originally a Florida native.
Okay.
So I came up here, and let's call it December of 2013. So I think I've experienced every kind of winter there is since I've been here. But I can't take the Florida humidity anymore. So it's, my blood is thickened now that I've been up here. So I like 7 degrees and no humidity. It's cliche to say, but
yeah,
I kind of like it. So for my friends back in Florida, seasons.
Right.
As they remind me often. So.
Right. Oh man. Well, there's an old saying in Indiana, or probably the Midwest, that if you're going to plant a vegetable garden, you don't do it before Mother's Day, because there's always this random week where there's a killing frost or some random snow or sleet or something that And I was talking to some folks who work at Sun King recently, and they're like, man, and I go, I know, it tricks you into thinking like April, it's sunny, and we got, mid-70s a couple of days, and you're like, I want to get out and plant. No, don't do it.
Yeah.
Always wait till Mother's Day.
I agree. Well, I'll give you my last question here, Dave, and I greatly appreciate you sitting down with me. When I sit down with, clients for the first time, I always say, if we were to look back from now 3 years from now, and we could look back and say, did we accomplish everything we wanted to do in that time, whether it's personally, financially, emotionally? If we were to do another podcast 3 years from now, where do you see Sun King 3 years from now as opposed to where you guys sit today?
Being awesomer, and I mean that in all facets. Sure. Like the one thing, COVID's been terrible, and I've been lucky that I haven't been personally affected in a way that somebody has, passed away or anything like that. So, I'm knocking on a stainless table. Hopefully that continues.
I'll call it wood. It's good.
Right, on that front, or maybe my head, wooden head. But COVID, as I've said to our staff, COVID giveth and COVID taketh away. And, what it's taken away has been a lot. But what it has given us, I think, if we truly stop to look around, a beautiful reset, right? So we've had to pivot. In order to survive as humans, that's, in our DNA. As a business, that has to be baked into your DNA. Even without COVID, you still have to pivot where the market is going and talk about, and that's, back to seltzers, right?
Yeah.
So where do consumers want to be, adult beverage consumers want to be in the future? That's where we're going to skew to as well, while keeping our core principles, right? We want to be good stewards to the humans that work at Sun King and to the community at large. And so if we, keep that as kind of a North Star, then I think we're going to be okay in 3 years, and I think we'll reach that Awesomemer plateau. There are things that we haven't even dreamt of yet that in the next 3 years will be, will become a reality.
Well, that's beautiful, man. Well, thank you for your time, Dave. Cheers.
Cheers, Geoff.
Thanks for sitting down. Sun King, come check them out, either in Carmel, Fishers, or here at the home base at the mothership in Indianapolis.
Don't forget Broad-Ripple or the airport.
Or the airport opening soon. I was traveling through the airport, call it before the pandemic stepped up, man. So I saw that you guys were going there, so that's great. So come check them out. Support your local community. Thanks, Dave.
Well, that's it for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. For the latest on financial views with local brews, please check out our website at financialviewswithlocalbrews.com. You can also find us on YouTube via our channel there under the same name, Financial Views with Local Brews, as well as follow us on all of our social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, where you can like and connect with us throughout the craft beer universe that we're trying to explore here in the great state of Indiana. As always, cheers. The next round's on me, and I look forward to seeing you for future episodes. Bye, everyone.